Hey, folks, and welcome to another edition of Dawg Walk Talk presented to you by DawgsHQ. As always, I'm your host, Jake Roos, and with me, as always, the man fresh in from Miami, and that's Palmer Toms. PT, how you rested up, brother?
Not very well, and headed back to Athens from Nashville. Obviously spent the holidays here, as much of the holidays as I could here in Nashville with the family, but headed back to Athens to get all settled in before hitting the road once again to Indianapolis later this week. Certainly excited to do so, but not very well rested in the process. Hey, we'll sleep when football season's over.
Well, we're not too far off, right? I mean, I think that we got one more game for college football, and then that's it. I guess there's probably a couple crappy bowls to work in between now and then, but
I think it's just one more. I think it's just one more.
Is that right? Wow. I can't believe it's almost here though. But yeah, obviously, like you said, late night in Miami. And I'm sure the dogs were enjoying their night late into the evening as well. Not so much that they wanted to give a Gatorade bath to Kirby Smart, though, or that he would let them do that. Georgia walks away from the Orange Bowl, a 34-11 victor over the Michigan Wolverines in what I think is pretty fair to call convincing fashion from whistle to whistle. It seemed like, Georgia was in control of that game. Michigan never really able to get their legs under them. I guess you were in the press box, Palm. You were in person watching it. I was watching on TV. What was your takeaway from it? I mean, what were the big keys that stood out in your mind? I mean, anything that you saw, I guess, from this Georgia team that maybe you didn't see from the Georgia team a month ago in Mercedes-Benz?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me, and obviously it doesn't compare to Mercedes-Benz because of the opponent, but I think Georgia was a bigger, faster, stronger, more physical football team. And that's what won them this game. I mean, if you get on social media, you start scrolling around, you see clips from this game, highlights from this game of Georgia players just putting the hammer down on Michigan players, whether it's Jamari Salyer in the trenches, Trayvon Walker, on the opposite side of the ball in the trenches, Nakobe Dean with his play recognition and ability to get after the quarterback and make plays in open space. Chaz Chambliss with a very physical hit that ended up getting him tossed. You've got Quay Walker was making big plays in open space. These Georgia players were all over the field. And I think it's a combination of they are just a better, more talented football team than Michigan, but also I think that they came ready to play. They came with a chip on their shoulder. They admitted as much this week. They came ready to play, especially defensively, but offensively too. Wanted to prove some things. As much as Stetson Bennett doesn't hear the noise and wants to block it out, you know that he's got to know what's going on in the outside world. And he silences the haters with a 310-yard, 3-touchdown performance. Maybe probably the best of his career, especially given the stage of it. Defensively, the questions were there of, is this group a fraud? They've got all these future NFL guys, but they get just absolutely embarrassed by Alabama. Are they a fraud? Well, they go out and they hold Michigan to 3 points for all of 55 minutes. I think that I think it was a very all-around complete effort for Georgia in this game, and it was something that Georgia fans certainly wanted to see after a poor performance in Atlanta. And now you're going to be, trying to meet that poor performance head on, with a rematch with that opponent here in a couple of weeks or in a week, couple of days, that we'll be talking about here quite a bit over this next week.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Felt like a return to form for Georgia. This was what you'd seen from Georgia most of the year. But this was, outside of Alabama, this was the toughest team they'd played, and they handled them really well. I mean, they really, put it to Michigan and really dominated, like I said earlier, from whistle to whistle. Stetson Bennett, I would have to agree with you. easily one of the best games of his career. I thought that last touchdown he threw to James Cook was probably one of the best touchdown throws he's made in his career, just because of the duress he was under and feeling the pressure, the guy breathing down his neck, and he's able to stand in that pocket and deliver. We'll see about silencing the haters. I mean, I think there's still a lot of people out there with a lot of skepticism regarding it, but I don't think there's any skepticism in terms of what Georgia's going to do or what the coaches want to do moving forward. I mean, Stetson's going to start this national championship game, and he's going to have, I would say, a pretty decent leash in order to play this one. We'll see. I mean, if it ends up in a situation like you had last time, well, all cards off the table. But at this point, I think that you've got to roll with what you got. And right now, Stetson's got some good mojo rolling for him. Defensively, definitely like to see the return of pressure. Darion Kendrick, huge for Georgia. That's the kind of thing that just demoralizes, I think, another offense. They couldn't really get anything going. And, even that second one maybe wasn't necessarily a dagger, but, it was just frustrating. It had to be for Michigan to keep dealing with that. So overall, a really complete performance, kind of in all facets for the Dogs. I think they played well on all fronts. Stetson spreading the ball out well, got a number of guys involved in the pass game. Run game was, serviceable, I would say, 190 yards total. So you got to like that. I mean, knocking on the door of 200, pretty well spread out, but everybody averaging about 4.5 a carry, roughly, something like that. Your lead guys anyway. Brock Bowers does what he does. Once again, my God, a freshman, and even old AD Mitchell gets involved for a little bit of action on the touchdown circuit as well. So, it felt like kind of a culmination to me of what we've seen. I know that this isn't the end, but a lot of those guys who had contributed all year and kind of disappeared maybe during that Alabama game sort of resurfaced against Michigan. And I think that was a very advantageous, obviously, for Georgia.
Let me ask you this, Jake.
Yeah.
You bring that up as like a culmination of all these guys playing very well. Was that Georgia's best game that they've played this season?
You'd have to say so, I think. I mean, like I said, from an all-around standpoint, I mean, I guess you could say Vanderbilt, if you wanted to, was probably a little bit different just because they were able to score like 28 in the first quarter. But
35 in the first quarter.
35. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Given the level of competition, I think absolutely. I don't think they looked as good as they did against Michigan, against Clemson early in the season. They probably looked maybe a smidge. They probably, in my opinion, they looked more dominant probably against Michigan than they did Kentucky
or Arkansas.
So, like I said, you have to factor in, I think, when you're kind of making a judgment like that, what's the level of competition it's getting done against. And given the level of competition, easily the best game Georgia played all year. Not really a question in my mind. I assume you agree.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree there. I think that, like we've said several times already here in our short time on, it's been, it was a culmination of everything working. Georgia was able to run the ball. The running backs don't get into the end zone, but 190 yards on the ground, 4.5 yards per carry for your big, heavy hitters, 5.4 as a team. You've got to be happy with that. Georgia was able to make plays in the passing game, and the receivers that you would expect to make plays, made them. Brock Bowers, AD Mitchell, James Cook, Jermaine Burton, those guys were there, on the receiving end of those big plays. You had big plays in the passing game in terms of, 7 plays of 15 yards or more, airing the ball out. You had 2 plays of 50 plus, another of 39 for a score that probably could have gone for 50 had the end zone not been the end goal there. And so, I think that, and then you factor it in the run game as well. Georgia was able to move the ball in chunks there. A 21-yard rush from from James Cook, a 20-yard scramble from Stetson Bennett, and at the end of things, a 31-yard rush from old Dejan Edwards, the victory cigar. So I think that, in terms of offensively, it was absolutely, an all-around performance. Defensively, you had to be pleased with the pressure that Georgia got on the quarterback, especially coming against an offensive line of the caliber of Michigan's. 4 sacks against the Joe Moore Award-winning group, especially after the performance that Georgia had in the SEC championship game, lackluster performance there with 0 sacks. To rebound with 4 sacks was huge. So, give credit to the pressure. On the back end, they're not giving up a bunch of big plays. In fact, they're making the big plays, with Darian Kendrick coming up with 2 interceptions. So they're forcing turnovers. They also had the fumble recovery. I think that whenever you're talking about a game with 3 turnovers forced, plus a couple more on downs, they held their own, didn't give up big plays, for the most part, or at least when it mattered. That's for sure. The only, big play in the passing game was, in 42 yards in the first half. But I think that ended with an interception. Or maybe it was a field goal. I can't remember. Lot going on in my head after this last couple of weeks. But I think that overall, you've got to be happy with the way that the defense put things together, with the way that the offense put things together. To me, I would give both those sides of the ball an A or an A+ performance.
Sure. Did you? I don't know how much of the Cotton Bowl you got to watch, given where you were.
I got to see a little bit of it. It was on in the press box. I had several TVs around me, good view of those. But the focus was elsewhere. So I caught a couple glimpses here and there out of the corner of my eye. Looking forward to getting, to sit down and watch that here before too long. And of course I'll probably hit the SEC championship game, to watch the rematch of that, or to watch that ahead of the rematch of that. So,
yeah, well, I guess my question was going to be, did you feel that Georgia played Michigan better than Alabama played Cincinnati?
Yes. And I said that in the press box. I said to the people that were around me, I think I said it to you, and we had this conversation ahead of time. You were not going to pick Georgia to beat Alabama if Georgia was to beat Michigan and just get by. With this kind of performance, I had told myself I wouldn't do it. Georgia, the matchups of Georgia and Alabama are way more advantageous for Alabama than they are, for Georgia in terms of the way that Alabama wants to play and the way that you can beat Georgia, where Georgia's susceptible. But I think that after a performance like the one that we saw on Friday night, you got to think about it a little bit more. And there's a reason Georgia is favored by 2.5 points, or opened there.
Yeah, no question. That was a surprise to me. I'll be honest with you. Not because Georgia didn't play super well on Friday night. They really did, obviously. But I just thought that was a really interesting move by Vegas. And it feels almost like that. It feels like that that sort of sentiment that a lot of people have of, it's tough to beat a team twice.
Yeah.
And I get that. And a lot of people say that. And, I do think that there's probably some truth to that.
But at the same time, Vegas had that line set, in the hypothetical rematch game. Vegas had set that line of Georgia is going to be favored in this hypothetical rematch. That obviously, things play out the way that they did on Friday night, and that's what Vegas comes out with as their opening line.
Yeah. I guess we'll get into predictions and all that later on this week when previewing Alabama. But, now that we know, now that the opponent's set, that for me, frankly, I feel like we've covered most of the Orange Bowl. I think we've pretty well, there wasn't a lot to say. It was Georgia. Like I said, it felt to me like Georgia all season. And we had trouble doing some of these podcasts over the course of the season because there wasn't really a lot to say in terms of recapping the game. It was an ass beating. And that's what Georgia did again on Saturday or on Friday night. So, a little bit tough in that regard. But I guess, now that we know what's ahead and now that we know what's set for the national championship, I'm curious, and I'm sure Kirby will get asked this week, and I look forward to hearing what he has to say about it, because I'm sure he'll say, "Oh, we were focused on Michigan," da 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 da. Of course, but do you get the sense? Because I do, that this means it's better that they got Alabama in the draw. That's the harder draw, certainly, but for Kirby to say all this, you're either elite or you're not. This is the chance to prove that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if Georgia were to win a national championship and it was over Cincinnati, it wouldn't feel the same. You would
still feel good.
It would still feel great for Georgia fans to get that monkey off their back. Sure. But let's be honest. Georgia has two big, monkeys on their back, elephants in the room, and it's winning a national championship and beating Alabama.
Yep.
And, there's not been a team that has given Georgia as much trouble as Alabama over the last, 2 decades, as the Crimson Tide. And so I think that, to get both of those burdens off of their back, to have a chance to do that is absolutely what they wanted.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a rare opportunity where you get to slay two dragons at one time. You've really, really got a chance to do something that, quite frankly, could put a lot of people on notice. And, I think that's, like I said, maybe that's not, it's not the easier draw, certainly, but
because if they don't beat Alabama, and they were to beat Cincinnati in this scenario,
yeah.
Everyone, the national media is looking at this. Hey, look, Georgia got the national championship, that they've been searching for since 1980. Okay, great, but they still can't beat Alabama.
Maybe. I got to think they would give a little bit of credit to that Cincinnati team for beating Alabama. I mean, a group of 5 team coming in and beating them in the playoffs on that big stage. I don't think it would excuse Georgia. Don't get me wrong, but I think it would probably. I think people would probably give Cincinnati a little more credit. They wouldn't give Georgia very much, but they.
But at the same time, next time that Georgia and Alabama meet up, let's just say,
sure,
next year in Atlanta for the SEC championship, since it almost seems inevitable every year now that those two teams are going to be meeting up there. The narrative would still be, hey, congratulations, Georgia, you won your national championship, but you didn't beat Alabama in the process. You lost to them in the process.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a program thing. It's got to be, to some degree, whether he will admit it or not, a Kirby thing. It's got to be lingering in the back of his mind. Jimbo's the only guy who's done it, right, as the former assistant. And so, there's all of those factors play in. And I think that while it would make it super sweet to win against Cincinnati, it's just pure, 8-inch thick buttercream frosting on the cake when it's a chance to do it against Alabama. Now, I don't know. I'm still torn on my prediction. You sound like maybe you've been swayed a bit, perhaps.
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, okay.
I'm really giving it hard consideration, just because of
like you said, I was locked in. I said no way would I pick Georgia. I
was in complete agreement.
Yeah, and we'll see. I told you I do that one mostly by feel anyway. So let's see. I was wrong on Michigan too. I thought they'd play Georgia a lot tighter. I just thought that those were two much more similar teams. But
I think everyone was.
The talent differential, and I mentioned this over today, Sunday, over at DawgsHQ in the opinion column I did. But this is Ali Frazier, man. This is what everybody wanted this year. This is the 2 clear heavyweights of college football in 2021. There's not a lot of debate, I don't think, in anyone's mind, or at least there shouldn't be, as to who the 2 best teams were this season. And you get the chance to see them duke it out. I think that's cool. I'm happy that we get this opportunity to see it one more time this year, and to see what's going to happen, because either Georgia's elite or they're not. And we will certainly find that out on January 10th. I mean,
I will say, to me, I think it's a chance for Georgia to make it right. If they lose that SEC championship game and win this one, you can look back on that one and say, hey, well, Georgia was the most dominant team all season long. They had a hiccup in the SEC championship game, but they made it right by beating Alabama, when it really mattered. But at the same time, on the other hand, you've got Alabama with the opportunity to say, hey, you want to say Georgia was the most dominant team all season. Well, we go in there and we curb stomp them again, in Atlanta, and then we get a chance to do it again, a chance to beat them again. It would put it very definitively that Alabama was the best team this year. I think that this is a chance to really define, and that's what you want in a national championship game. You want to be able to, at the end of the day, say this was the best team in college football for this season. And I think we got that chance this year.
It kind of harkens back. I think back to, give my book here a little free press, The Road to Georgia, the book I wrote earlier last year. There were so many guys who mentioned that idea of, at that time, the big question was, could Georgia beat Florida? And they were sitting in, coaches were coming into their homes and they were asking those questions. And I think that this is a chance for Georgia to answer that question in the minds of a lot of these kids, these recruits, these guys that they split from time to time, because right now the answer is pretty clear. I mean, Alabama, I think, was an 8-game winning streak against Georgia, something like that. It feels like the Tide have really, I mean, it doesn't feel like it. They have owned that series over the last 10 years. And I think that, this is a chance for Georgia to either level the playing field a bit, or Alabama's going to widen that gap even further, because Alabama, I've said it before, Alabama's the standard. Alabama's what everybody wants to be and what you should be trying to play to if you're going to be competing in this sport. They're the pinnacle. And so Georgia's got a chance to level that playing field a bit more, get a little bit closer to that, in my opinion, or Alabama's going to widen that gap even further. And that's going to make it all the more difficult, I think, for Georgia moving forward. But they've got a chance to do it.
Yeah. And I think that that's exactly what Georgia wants, is a chance. It's what you play for all season long. You play for a chance to have a chance to win the national championship, to be one of those four, as we've said several times. You're playing for a chip and a chair. Georgia had that in the semifinals, took care of business, and now there's two teams left at the table.
It's like Palmer on a date night, just looking for a chance, baby. So Georgia, like I said, we will get a lot. Obviously, we'll have you covered wall to wall on all things Georgia and Alabama this week. We'll have a lot of crossover again with our guys over at BCS. Clint Lamb, I know, will be a frequent contributor over to DawgsHQ this week, and Palmer, you as well, on the other side over there. So make sure to stay tuned into both sides. We'll have a lot of great content coming on each side for sure. I think that's it for me. You got anything else, Paul?
Nope. Happy New Year to all of our listeners. Really appreciate everything that y'all have helped us get started here in the last couple of months, and really excited to keep getting into more and more of it as we head into 2022.
2022, a whole year of DawgsHQ. That's got a good ring to it. I like that. So make sure, like I said, get over and check us out. We'll have full game previews. We'll have you covered, like I said, wall to wall, and we'll have you locked in and ready for all of the happenings in Indianapolis as the Georgia Bulldogs travel up there and face the Crimson Tide of Alabama on January 10th. For myself, though, and Palmer Toms, this has been another edition of Dawg Walk Talk, presented to you by DawgsHQ. Thanks for tuning in.